We had a nonprofit in Reno that helped kids off the street into safe housing and gave them, ways into college or trade programs. And so a lot of those kids that came through that program were aged out foster kids. So I was really aware of the foster care system. There are pros and cons. There are good people in that system. There are good people in the juvenile justice system as well, but there are also people that are not so great in both of those systems. And I've worked with kids in juvenile justice as well, writing their own stories or whatever. And I've worked with foster kids. So I really want, because there are a lot of there are a lot of readers that just don't think about, certain spaces. And a foster is something that I think people really need to, you know, think about what it's like to be a kid that, lives it through that system, whether they need to be taken away from their homes or not. And I don't know, it's hard for them to accept help. That's what I found with foster kids, because they're never sure that it's not gonna be yanked away again. Storm and Lake, their mom is a stripper, their grandma is a stripper too. They take turns watching them. The grandma is really the one that's the most abusive, um, but the kids just they grow up and they only had each other really. So they were so tight. Nobody wanted to be friends with them because they could see, that these kids were not somebody they'd want their kids to play with, right? So growing up, all they had was each other. And so when they're finally taken, they're in placements together for a while, and then they're separated and they don't see each other for several years. But that doesn't mean that the bond is it's still there. It's just it's been stretched. And so they're trying to find their way back to each other. And it's the things they go through foster placements, some good, some not so good. One of them's Lake ends up on the street, homeless, and it's hard to be a teen girl on the street homeless. And Storm ends up in the juvenile justice system, because he's got anger issues and the things and he's really righteous about most of that stuff, but that doesn't matter. You still have to abide by the rules. I try to make everything pretty organic, the way the flow through there, pretty organic. The experiences. Again, I worked with foster kids. I've talked to a lot of foster kids. I watched a lot of interviews with foster kids, and there are things that are common to them that I touched on, and then there are things that are not so. And also the idea of like y- adolescence is figuring out who you are anyway, right? It's all about discovering who you are, self-discovery. And how do you do that if you don't even if you're gonna be in the same place, a month from now? How do you have a girlfriend if you don't know if you're gonna be able to, keep having that girlfriend? How do you go to school and succeed in school if you don't know if you'll be in the same school in 6 months? And so some kids are very determined to succeed, and a lot of them don't. They give up on it. And so I wanted to be able to through some of the peripheral characters, I think you really get the ones that give up on on life, and they just kind of just whatever happens, happens. Parker, who is Lake's girlfriend, that's her. She's just like, whatever happens, happens. I'm just whatever. You know. It's hard to always know exactly where to start a book and where to end a book, And so I didn't want too much of the little kid stuff, but in the recollections, then I could get that stuff in. And you can see then how what they're living now reflects those scenes from their earlier childhood that way.